Imagine you're a Roman senator, walking through the forum. The sun catches the edge of your toga, and on it is a stripe of brilliant color. Not red, not blue, but a deep, shimmering purple. That stripe tells the world everything it needs to know about you. Now, imagine you are the emperor himself. You are not just wearing a stripe, your entire toga is this same impossible color. It is a color that proclaims you are more than a man, you are a living god. For millennia, one color above all others was synonymous with power, wealth, and divinity. From the emperors of Rome to the princes of the Byzantine Empire, purple was the color of royalty. But why? Why this specific shade on the spectrum? The answer isn't simply a matter of taste. It turns out, the story of purple is a fascinating journey into biology, extreme economics, and the very chemistry of how humanity created value. To understand this, we first have to appreciate a simple but profound fact. True, vibrant purple is incredibly rare in nature. Look around you. The world is filled with the greens of chlorophyll in plants, the browns and grays of minerals in earth, the blues of the sky and water. We see these colors because of the pigments contained within objects, which absorb certain wavelengths of light and reflect others back to our eyes. Pigments that create shades of red and yellow are relatively common. Iron oxides, for instance, give us rust and ochre. But the molecules required to produce a stable, deep purple are far more complex and biochemically expensive for an organism to make. While we can find purple flowers like violets or gemstones like amethyst, these sources were never practical for dyeing textiles. Their pigments were too faint, faded in the sun, or were impossible to extract in any meaningful quantity. For most of human history, a true, lasting purple was almost a fantasy. It was a color that shouldn't exist in a world of cloth and thread. And then, someone found it. Not in a mine, and not on a flower, but inside a living creature in the sea. The discovery is credited to the ancient Phoenicians, the master mariners and traders of the Mediterranean who lived in cities like Tyre and Sidon, in modern-day Lebanon. The legend, as told by a writer in the 2nd century, speaks of the god Heracles walking on the beach with his dog. The dog, chewing on a strange sea snail that had washed ashore, came back with its mouth stained a brilliant purple. The reality was likely a more gradual discovery by observant fishermen. They found that a particular group of predatory sea snails, known as Murex snails, held a remarkable secret. When disturbed or when preparing to prey on other mollusks, the snail excretes a mucus from a special gland. This liquid starts as clear or yellowish, but when exposed to sunlight and oxygen, a magical transformation occurs. Through a complex photochemical reaction, the liquid morphs through shades of yellow, green, blue, and finally settles into a deep, intense purple. This was Tyrian Purple, named after the city of Tyre, which became the epicenter of its production. It was unlike any dye the ancient world had ever seen. It was incredibly vibrant, but more than that, it was permanent. In fact, instead of fading in the sunlight, the color only grew deeper and more brilliant. It didn't wash out. A cloth dyed with Tyrian purple would hold its color for centuries, its chemical structure bonded permanently to the fibers. The Phoenicians had found the impossible color, but this discovery came at an almost unbelievable cost, which is the true key to its royal status. To understand why Tyrian purple was so expensive, you have to understand the sheer scale of the labor involved. First, you had to get the snails. Divers had to brave the waters of the Mediterranean, setting traps and harvesting them from the seabed, one by one, and you needed a staggering number of them. Evidence from archaeological sites and ancient texts suggests that it took around 12,000 of these tiny snails to produce just 1.4 grams of pure dye. That's barely enough to color the trim on a single Roman toga. To dye an entire garment in solid purple would require hundreds of thousands of snails. Once harvested, the work had only just begun. Each individual snail, often just a few centimeters long, had to have its shell carefully cracked open. Then, the single tiny mucus gland had to be extracted by hand. These thousands upon thousands of glands were then placed into a vat, usually with salt water, and left to steep under the sun for several days. The process was not only labor-intensive, it was famously disgusting. The vats of decaying snail glands and fermenting secretions produced a horrific stench. Ancient writers described the smell as a foul combination of rotting fish and powerful garlic that clung to the workers and the very air of the dye-producing cities for miles around. Entire districts were dedicated to this foul-smelling but immensely profitable industry. It was a brutal, stinking, and monumentally difficult process. In short, the price of Tyrian purple reflected this immense effort. At the height of the Roman Empire, a pound of purple-dyed wool was worth more than a pound of gold. A single imperial purple robe could cost the equivalent of a senator's annual salary, or more. So, what does this all mean? It means that wearing Tyrian purple wasn't just a fashion statement. It was the ultimate display of power and wealth. It showed the world that you possessed the resources to command a small army of laborers, to monopolize a vast stretch of coastline, and to fund an entire industrial process, all for the color of your clothes. It was an economic spectacle. A person wearing purple was wearing the labor of thousands, the stench of an entire city, and a fortune that could buy land, soldiers, and influence. Naturally, when something becomes that valuable, people in power will seek to control it. And that is exactly what happened. As the Roman Republic gave way to the empire, the right to wear purple became not just a matter of wealth, but a matter of law. The Romans instituted what were called sumptuary laws, rules designed to curb extravagance and reinforce social hierarchies. Julius Caesar and Augustus began restricting the use of the color. By the reign of later emperors, the rules were absolute. Only the emperor himself was permitted to wear the toga picta, a solid Tyrian purple toga embroidered with gold. It became the symbol of his supreme, quasi-divine authority. For a senator to wear an all-purple garment would be an act of rebellion, a direct challenge to the throne. It was treason, punishable by death. The message was clear. This color does not belong to the people. It belongs to the emperor. It is the color of the state itself. This tradition continued for over 1,000 years in the Byzantine Empire, the successor to Rome in the East. Their emperors were considered born in the purple, a term, porphyrogenetos, which literally meant being born to a reigning emperor in the purple chamber of the Imperial Palace of Constantinople. The dye works became an imperial monopoly, its secrets fiercely guarded. For 2 millennia, the Murex snail dictated the color of power. But all empires fall, and industries can fall with them. The decline of the Western Roman Empire disrupted the complex trade networks. Later, the sack of Constantinople in 1453 by the Ottoman Turks dealt the final blow. The last of the imperial dye workshops were destroyed, and the intricate knowledge of how to produce true Tyrian purple was lost to time. For the next 400 years, true, lasting purple once again became a memory, a lost color of the ancients. So, what happened? Why is purple no longer royal? The end of the story is as remarkable as its beginning. It doesn't take place on a Mediterranean beach, but in a cluttered London laboratory during the height of the Industrial Revolution. The year is 1856. An 18-year-old chemistry student named William Henry Perkin is at home during his Easter holiday, trying to make a name for himself. He has been tasked with a monumental challenge, synthesizing quinine, the only known treatment for malaria. At the time, quinine could only be extracted from the bark of cinchona trees, found in South America. A synthetic version would save millions of lives and make its inventor fabulously wealthy. Perkin decided to try and synthesize it from coal tar, a foul, sticky waste product from the city's gas lights and coke ovens. It was an incredibly abundant and cheap material, thought to be useless. His experiment, predictably, was a failure. Instead of the clear crystals of quinine, he was left with a beaker full of a dark, thick, reddish-black sludge. Frustrated, he began to clean his equipment with alcohol, and that's when he saw it. As the alcohol mixed with the sludge, it dissolved into a stunningly beautiful, bright purple solution. Perkin, with a genius that went beyond his years, immediately recognized what he had found. He hadn't made quinine. He had, completely by accident, created the world's first synthetic dye. He abandoned his quest for medicine and pivoted. He found that his new color could dye silk and cotton a vibrant purple that, like its ancient predecessor, did not fade. He patented his invention, named it mauve, after the French word for the mallow flower, and built a factory to produce it. Mauve was a sensation. Because it was made from industrial waste, it was incredibly cheap. The color that had once been worth more than gold, a color that emperors had killed to control, could now be produced in vast quantities in a factory. The age of scarcity was over. Within a few years, Empress Eugenie of France and Queen Victoria of England were seen wearing mauve gowns, sparking a worldwide fashion craze. London and Paris were swept by what was called mauve measles, as the color suddenly appeared everywhere, from ribbons and gloves to dresses and suits. The color of emperors was now the color of the middle class. It had been democratized by chemistry. Ultimately, the story of purple is a mirror for how humanity defines value. For thousands of years, value was inextricably linked to what was rare and difficult in the natural world. The color of royalty came from a tiny snail because of the immense human effort required to harvest its secret. Its value was a direct product of its scarcity. But the discovery of mauve in a dirty beaker marked a fundamental shift in the human experience. It was a moment where our species, through consciousness and understanding, learned to create value out of thin air, or in this case, out of industrial sludge. We were no longer simply at the mercy of what nature chose to provide. Through science, we could now invent our own abundance. So, the next time you see the color purple, remember its dual history. Remember the thousands of snails and the stinking vats that made it the color of gods and emperors. But also remember the young chemist who, in failing to make a medicine, accidentally gave that color to the world. It's a story not just about a color, but about the evolution of human ingenuity itself, our species' incredible journey from finding value in the world to creating it from our own minds. If you enjoyed this look into our past, subscribe for more stories hidden in plain sight.